So, when you see headlines about China's economy, they usually scream one of two things, right? Either it's unstoppable growth or it's imminent collapse. But the truth, as always, is way more complex and, frankly, a lot more interesting. So today, we're going to pop the hood on the China machine and really see how the gears turn.
And you know, this quote really gets to the heart of it. If you try to think about China's economy like it's a physics problem with a set of predictable rules, you're going to get it wrong. It's way more like physiology. It's a living, breathing organism, constantly adapting. And to understand it, you have to see how all the different parts, the organs, the systems, actually work together.
All right, so let's jump right into the core paradox here. Politically, sure, China is a top-down, authoritarian state that's run from Beijing. But on the money side, economically, it's one of the most decentralized places on Earth. Get this, local governments handle a mind-boggling 85% of all public spending. This constant tug-of-war between the center and the provinces, well, that's the secret to how the whole machine operates.
Okay, so to really unpack this, here's how we're going to do it. First, we'll look at the strange blueprint for its economic engine. Then we'll see how that engine built an absolute juggernaut. After that, we'll examine the cracks that are now showing up in the foundation. Then we'll dig into the massive effort to reinvent the entire growth model. And finally, what all of this means for you and the rest of the world.
So how does this engine actually work? You can really think of it as a kind of hybrid. On one hand, it copied the top-down, state-led development model from places like Japan and South Korea. But it mixed that with this wild, let's throw it at the wall and see what sticks approach. Provinces were basically allowed to run huge policy experiments. If something worked, great. Beijing would roll it out across the country. If it was a total flop, well, the damage was contained locally.
So what did this unique engine actually build? Well, it kicked off one of the most astonishing economic transformations in all of human history. And it all happened in what you could call a three-phase rocket launch.
The first wave crashes in during the 80s. They decollectivized farming, and boom, rural incomes doubled, almost overnight. This created a whole new class of consumers, which then fueled the second wave, the massive industrial and export boom of the 90s. Foreign money poured in, and exports grew by 6 times. The third wave, in the 2000s, was an urbanization binge so insane that steel production alone saw a 700% jump in just a decade. Just think about that.
And here is the absolute secret ingredient, the thing that made China's story so different from Japan's or South Korea's. It's foreign direct investment, or FDI. See, instead of hiding its industries behind protective walls, China basically threw open the front door. It decided that attracting foreign companies, and crucially their technology, was going to be central to its entire game plan. So when you pick up a product that says made in China, who do you think is actually making the thing? Well, the answer might actually surprise you. Foreign-owned companies produce nearly half of all of China's exports. But check this out. When you zoom in on just high-tech exports, that number shoots up to almost 70%. This wasn't just China rising. It was the world's factories literally picking up and moving to China.
But, a growth model like that, one based on just pouring in more concrete, more steel, more everything, it just couldn't last forever. It created unbelievable wealth, for sure, but it also cooked up some really deep structural problems and social strains that the old engine just isn't built to handle anymore.
And one of the most toxic byproducts of that incredible boom? Corruption. And we are talking about corruption on a scale that is almost impossible to wrap your head around. That whole system of decentralized power, tons of fast money, it was the perfect storm for graft.
I mean, how big are we talking? Let's just take one case, the former security chief, Zhou Yongkang. When he finally went down, authorities reported seizing $14.5 billion in assets, just from him and his circle. With that much money, he would have been one of the 10 richest people in the entire country, from one corruption case. At the very same time, inequality was just exploding. This number here, 0.49, that's China's Gini index back in 2008. Basically, it's a way to measure the gap between the rich and the poor. And a number that high means China's wealth gap was wider than in any developed country, and way, way wider than its neighbors like Japan or Korea. And look, the cracks weren't just in one place. They were popping up everywhere. You had these mountains of debt piled up by local governments. You had this totally bizarre housing market with way too many empty luxury apartments and not enough affordable homes. You had an environmental crisis so bad they literally called it the airpocalypse. And maybe most important of all, the old growth model just stopped working as well. It started taking more and more debt just to squeeze out a little bit of growth. The engine was definitely sputtering.
So, with all these warning lights flashing on the dashboard, China's leaders launched what is probably the most ambitious economic mission on the planet, a complete re-engineering of their entire growth model.
And this chart really lays out the fundamental shift they're trying to pull off. See, the old model, it was all about mobilization. Build more stuff, pour in more cash, grow no matter the cost. The new model, totally different. It's all about efficiency. It's about getting more out of what you already have, focusing on the return on your investment, and making a huge pivot from being export-led to being driven by Chinese consumers.
And a massive target for this whole efficiency push? The state-owned enterprises, or SOEs. You can see it right here. They control this enormous chunk of the country's assets, but they're way, way less productive than private companies. They just don't generate the same bang for buck. If you want a more efficient economy, you have to do something about these giant, lumbering state behemoths.
So what you have is this massive 4-part reform blueprint. And the key thing to get is that it's all connected, like a giant puzzle. You can't fix the state companies without fixing the financial system. You can't fix the local government debt problem without fixing the tax system. And you can't build a real consumer-driven society without tackling deep-seated issues like land rights. It is an unbelievably complex rewiring of the entire economic machine.
Okay, so for our last section, let's bring this home. What does all this internal re-engineering in China mean for the rest of us, for the world?
So naturally, this leads to a huge question that a lot of developing countries are asking themselves. Hey, can we just copy the China model? And the short answer really is probably not.
China's incredible success story came from this very specific cocktail of ingredients that's just almost impossible to replicate. I mean, think about it. It had Hong Kong right there serving as its financial and legal front door to the world. It was located right next door to the industrial powerhouses of Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. It had the unmatched organizing power of the Communist Party to hold it all together, and maybe most of all, its timing was perfect. It opened up right as global trade was exploding like never before.
And all of this really brings us to the final crucial question. What is the real challenge the world faces from a risen China? Is it about economics? Is it political? Is China a rival we need to beat or a partner we need to work with?
So, the argument here is that trying to contain China, like it's the old Soviet Union, is just a foolish idea. That strategy worked against a stagnant, decaying system, but it makes no sense when you apply it to a power as dynamic and adaptable as China has proven to be. Instead, the argument goes, the path forward is one of pragmatic accommodation, of managing China's rise as a global reality, not pretending you can stop.
So at the end of the day, forget the simple headlines of miracle or collapse. The China machine is powerful, it's complicated, and right now it's attempting what might be the most difficult economic pivot in modern history. Understanding how that machine actually works isn't just some academic exercise. It's literally the first step to navigating the new global reality that's taking shape all around us. The real question isn't if the machine will succeed or fail, but how its constant evolution will reshape all of our lives everywhere.